After all, he was the leader of the martial arts world, so it would have been unusual if he hadn't been furious at Lu Xing's question. "What did you just say?" Cumberland roared like a wild beast. He had never heard such disrespect before, such a blatant public humiliation. Everyone who stood before him always showed the utmost reverence, carefully measuring even their breaths. Yet, this young man, despite Cumberland's thunderous fury, showed no fear. He didn't seem like a reckless troublemaker or a fool challenging authority. Instead, he simply smiled, raised a hand to his face, and peeled away his disguise. As light flickered in his palm, Lu Xing's true appearance was revealed. The tight-fitting shirt beneath his coat accentuated his chiseled abs, and his youthful arrogance was unmistakable. Those who had once witnessed his overwhelming strength would never forget it, not to mention Wan's mother, who had already been paying close attention to his extraordinary power. "It's him? It's really him?" Her eyes widened in disbelief. Meanwhile, Lu Xing's smirk remained unchanged. Taking advantage of everyone's stunned reactions, he calmly stated, "First, let's destroy this tower." With a mighty punch to the ground, cracks of various sizes spread across the floor like a spiderweb, causing the ground to rise and fall chaotically. He didn't attack the tower directly but instead disturbed the earth beneath it, sending tremors up through the building. In an instant, the roof collapsed, and those inside panicked as the floor beneath them swayed like a ship in a storm. The tower, which stood over 10 stories tall, was already shaking from top to bottom within seconds of Lu Xing's strike. "This is bad! Everyone, evacuate now!" people shouted. "Get downstairs!" Faced with such tremors, they focused their energy on escaping. A simple leap away from the collapsing ground would be enough, yet not a single person dared to approach Lu Xing within a 5-meter radius. Though they gritted their teeth and glared at him, none took action. This place was filled with the world's strongest martial artists, and he had brazenly attacked them all. They held their breath, waiting for Cumberland, the most powerful among them, to speak. Stepping out of the swirling dust, Cumberland looked imposing and furious, his fists clenched as he advanced with a mix of rage and shock. "You Asian brat, who are you?" His gaze was filled with killing intent, warning the young man to realize the danger he was in. But just as he approached, a massive fist slammed into his face, crushing his features and sending him flying backward from the sheer force of Lu Xing's punch. The impact triggered a deafening explosion, and dazzling light filled the area. Cumberland, one of the strongest martial saints, was sent soaring like an insect swatted away. Disappearing into the distance, smoke still curled from Lu Xing's fist as he stood proudly and declared, "If you want answers, beat me first." From the moment he struck, negotiations were no longer an option. Cumberland had never felt such humiliation in his life. He hurtled through the air, a thick vein pulsing on his forehead as his fury reached its peak. Yet, just as his anger swelled, it was immediately crushed. Like a soaked rag sinking into a basin of water, Lu Xing remained utterly unfazed, one hand still in his pocket. Watching Cumberland struggle, he simply raised his leg and kicked him squarely in the ribs. The force of the kick compressed the air itself, and before Cumberland could even touch him, he was launched backward again. This time, he soared over the heads of the other martial saints, their eyes widening in shock as they watched. He looked less like a legendary fighter and more like a strange, unnamed bird flung into the sky. "What the hell are you staring at?" Cumberland roared midair. "Attack him, now!" His subordinates snapped back to reality, their hesitation replaced by fury. "No way! The leader of the Western Martial Arts Alliance, the #1 martial saint, Cumberland, one of the top 5 fighters in the world, has been stomped into the ground by some unknown Eastern brat? No! His strength is clearly only at level 8. This must be some kind of fluke." Right. Regaining their composure, they lunged forward, fists clenched. There was no way the pride of Western martial arts would allow an Eastern nobody to trample over them. Ridiculous. Kill this damn Easterner. Feel the wrath of all the Western martial saints. They each shouted, only to fall silent almost instantly. Something was wrong. Their movements slowed, then stopped entirely. Before they realized it, their feet had left the ground. Somehow, they were all lifted into the air, then unceremoniously dropped, When they looked up, an enormous subsequent crystal had appeared from nowhere. It didn't matter where it came from, what mattered was that this was an unparalleled opportunity. The first wave of martial artists who had charged at Lu Xing suddenly shifted direction, now racing toward the colossal crystal instead. This is it! While they're busy fighting, I'll absorb it first. Like moths to a flame, they dove toward the crystal, but before their hands could touch it, they froze. Reality was cruel. Even the world's strongest martial saints weren't necessarily entitled to a crystal this massive. The spoils belong to the last one standing. How dare you break the rules? A voice echoed coldly. Before the speaker could react, a sudden attack forced him to spin defensively. Two enormous slashes flashed before his eyes. Lu Xing had already appeared behind him. Standing firm, blood sprayed into the air, painting the battlefield red. As the greedy martial artists looked on in shock, looking down, the man saw a massive hole torn through his stomach. His half-black, half-white hair was drenched in horror. What? Before he could finish, he collapsed lifelessly. He had clearly blocked the attack. How did this happen? Lu Xing flexed his fingers, shaking off the blood like filth, then scoffed. I see now, Western martial saints only became strong by relying on drugs. How weak! His terrifying gaze swept across the remaining fighters. Any other greedy little cats unwilling to follow the rules? Frozen in fear, they dared not move, yet the light of the subsequent crystal continued to seduce them, pulling them deeper into its influence. Conflicted, he wanted to charge forward but didn't dare. Instead, he vented his frustration on the only person who might know this man's origins. How could he be this powerful? He completely disregarded logic. Why did someone like this exist? Harold, who exactly is he? Being called out unexpectedly, Harold could only scratch his face, unsure of how to respond. How was he supposed to explain this? Say that this man was some kind of deity dug up from the Arctic? And even if he did explain, what would be the point? Would Harold be able to stop him? Lu Xing acted as if he didn't know Harold at all. Instead, he raised his hand high, letting his power surge as he declared his presence. This battle would undoubtedly go down in history, the year 317 of martial arts, when 21 level 9 powerhouses of Blue Planet faced defeat. At the holy battlefall, on the sacred ocean island of Shisha, they all lost. The deafening roar from Lu Xing's descending hand drowned out his own words. A power terrifying beyond belief, like the sun crashing down upon the island, forced everyone to muster every ounce of strength just to resist. They held their ground, fear gripping them as they asked one another, "Is he trying to destroy this island?" Who could possibly know what that Eastern man was thinking? But if they didn't fight back, they would all die here, a voice roared in defiance. I refuse to accept this. Everyone, summon your Dharma avatars! In an instant, a dozen Dharma avatars appeared around Lu Xing, towering giants glaring down at him. Their overwhelming presence stirred up the air into a violent vortex. Yet, Lu Xing remained unnervingly calm. He leaped onto the peak of the subsequent crystal, as if afraid that others wouldn't see him clearly, directly facing all of them. Among the top-ranked martial saints ready to fight Lu Xing, there were also those who chose to stay out of it, merely observing the unfolding battle. Like the woman from Mingyu Hall, she had recognized Lu Xing of Dragon Nation the moment he transformed. Dong Zhongyu was bracing himself to shield Wan Wan, and he finally understood why Lu Xing had stolen the subsequent crystal without killing them. No wonder he held back against us, so the one attacking everyone this time was none other than his own brother-in-law. Lu Xing. Everyone had their own reactions, but the most notable was from the military elders. Realizing that Lu Xing had returned to the martial world, their excitement was laced with expletives and disbelief. Is this the future god of our military? I told you! There aren't many monsters in this world who can break common sense like this. Ha! A true prodigy like this deserves to be revered by our entire military. Our military shall rise! A glorious resurgence! One man, fighting over 20 martial saints. My God! Just watch, Lu Xing is about to shake the world. No one supported Lu Xing's actions more than the Dragon Nation military. The most shaken of them all was Princess Fiona. who, instead of fleeing, stood there in shock, questioning everything. Why? Why is this happening? Why did the man she admired suddenly change his form, attack her father, and now fight against all the martial saints? That punch to her father, Cumberland, completely severed any lingering affection she had for him. Even if Cumberland later acknowledged Lu Xing's strength, his behavior could never qualify him as a son-in-law. Fiona's heart shattered. She gazed at him, standing high above on the subsequent crystal, looking down upon everyone as if they were nothing. Even the Dharma avatars of the martial saints seemed insignificant in his eyes. Lu Xing focused his gaze on only one person, the only familiar face among those attacking him. This man had yet to summon his Dharma avatar. But why? With a smirk, Lu Xing spoke. It's been a long time, Martial Saint Tan. You're still not summoning your Dharma avatar? What are you hiding? So you won't go all out unless you taste true pain? Tan Jongyu ascended lightly, stroking his beard as he gazed at Lu Xing in silence. His expression made Lu Xing's fists itch. He clenched them tightly. I've shattered your will countless times in the 7th Martial Tower. Now, I finally get to beat the real you to a pulp. Lu Xing's words were only half comprehensible to Tan Jongyu, but he didn't see Lu Xing as anything significant. His cold gaze said it all, with a wave of his hand. He grasped his sword. Tan Jongyu wasn't surprised in the slightest. This man dared to punch Cumberland. Why would he spare the principal of his former university? Besides, he too wanted to strike that arrogant face a few times. He ran 2 fingers along his blade, watching sparks fly, then gently closed his eyes before raising the sword to his forehead. Pressing 2 fingers together, he whispered, "Flowing clouds," before decisively slashing down. Brilliant judgment! His eyes gleamed with icy killing intent. Suddenly, the sky erupted with countless razor-sharp shards, raining down upon the gathered warriors like shattered glass. They looked up in confusion. The Dragon Nation's martial saint had finally made his move. Lin Wanwan's mother furrowed her brows, tension written all over her face. Finally, Tan Zhongyu has stepped in. His invisible attacks, his signature technique, had begun.